This is the TeeRant. I'm here to talk about the economy. I personally am in the U.S. I know that the U.S. economy always has a major impact on the whole world. A subject of conversation and dialogue right now is inflation. And it's something that I personally knew was coming with all of the handing out of money due to COVID. It was going to happen. I appreciated the help when I needed it. I'm sure many of you did. There are a lot of people that came against it. I don't know if it was the right thing to do. I don't know if it was the wrong thing to do. Honestly, things like that are often a little of both. But here's what I had to say about it. First of all, a lot of the politicians that originally came against the whole thing, and I'm sure in their minds they were well-meaning. Some of them are kind of arrogant in the sense that I feel like they treat the general public like we're children, and we need their parenting to decide what's best for us and so on. Not sure that's entirely cool in that sense, but hey, it is what it is. That's really not what I want to talk about. So, the subject of inflation, basically in a nutshell, has to do with the fact that there's an aspect of economics that is based on the theory of supply and demand, that when you have something, a commodity of any kind, that is well plentiful, that people can go anywhere and get it, then it inherently becomes less valuable. So the more dollars that are in the economy, the US dollars, the less value they have. And that's the basic concept in a nutshell. However, the thing about it is that it doesn't have to be that way, I don't think. And what I mean by that is it's based on a philosophy that I heard in an audio book that I was listening to. It was talking about money, and it was basically the concept of money. And this guy was talking about when he does seminars on financial things, and he's teaching people about money and managing it, he likes to bring people up on the platform wherever he's speaking, and he has them bring an object, and he has them stand kind of in a circle. He introduces into the mix a $5 bill. He hands it to one person and says, okay, now buy something from somebody. And of course, these people are at a seminar. They're going to bring up things like, a clipboard or a notebook and a pen and things like that. Just any tangible object that they could bring with them up from their seat that is conducive to his demonstration. So the first person buys something from someone, a pen or whatever the object is, and they hand the $5 bill to the person that has the object that they've chosen to buy. They exchange. Now the person has the pen, the other person has the $5 bill, and he has them do this for a little while. And suddenly he'll call a halt to it, and he'll say, okay, now where's the $5 bill? And obviously it's like hot potatoes, somebody has it. He says, what has happened to the $5 bill? The obvious point that he's trying to make is the $5 bill doesn't disappear. It's still there. It's still in circulation. It still has value where someone can exchange it for something they want, and it goes on. And so he's saying nobody has lost anything. They each gained something, and the $5 bill is still in circulation. That was what he was showing people, is the function of currency, and that it doesn't degrade. I have to believe that the truth is that as the money goes into the economy, that it doesn't go away, and the value of it does not degrade in any way other than how people value it. And there are factors where, the wealthy can have effect on this, because they can decide, oh, there's a bunch of dollars bills out there, I'm going to raise my prices, and they start gouging. So it really comes down to the mentality of a few that influence the mentality of the many and drive the prices up. And that's when inflation becomes a problem. It devalues the currency. Now, I'm not going to claim to be a guru on all this stuff. It's a very complex equation, and I acknowledge that. But is a type of thing that can be controlled, and then of course, the banksters try to control it, and the way they control it is they raise interest rates. In the United States, there's the system of the Federal Reserve. They issue the currency. There's a whole lot of conspiracy theory about whether or not that is ethical and legal according to the Constitution. Some of it has been factored in by people in the past where they passed the Federal Reserve Act and it actually was incorporated into the Constitution. There's a lot of conspiracy theory along the concept that this was done covertly, so to speak, and that they pulled the wool over the general public's eyes. They implemented something in our Constitution and our law that imposed this process on the general public, and they were not aware of it, and they did not understand it. They didn't have line of sight of what was done and how it impacted them. But that's currently the situation that we live under. Along that same line, I watched this video, and I think my wife had put it on, and she was watching it, and I was over her shoulder, and I found it very, very interesting. Can't tell you who it was. I didn't start the video. I didn't read the commentary. It was not, on my device. But it was a senator, a congressman, or some public official like that at that level, that someone from the press or somebody was grueling him about how are we going to fix this, and the guy was saying, well, we got to do this, this, and this. And ultimately, at the end of the day, what the person that was interviewing, interrogating, whatever you want to call it, said, so basically what you're telling me is that we're going to raise unemployment. And the guy's like, no, we're not going to raise unemployment. That's not our goal here. Our goal is to manage inflation. And the interviewer says, hey, well, historically, every time we've enacted something like this to manage inflation, we have also inherently raised unemployment. And that process has proven to do this. And so I'm being pretty vague because I'm not trying to pretend like I know something I don't. But I do know that individual that was being interviewed and questioned on the topic began to get very uncomfortable. And I knew in my gut, from a lot of things that I'd been thinking about and observing and studying, there was truth to what the individual that was questioning him was saying. And that I don't believe it has to be that way. My goal here is to present information to the general public so that they understand a little bit about what's going on. If I raise questions in your mind, maybe you'll look into it, because that's what the TeeRant is here to do, is to get people to think and think critically. That's where I'm coming from. The individual that was interviewing, he was basically saying there's another way to do this, and I don't remember all the nuances of it. But it made sense to me, because this whole concept of circulating currency, the fact it doesn't disappear, and that the entire concept of a currency is based on public opinion. And so as long as the market remains optimistic, then there's not a problem. If it becomes unoptimistic, then it becomes a problem. So on the subject of money, one of the things that you hear a lot of dialogue about is that everybody likes to go back and say, hey, the gold standard. We should have never left the gold standard. And at a glance, it seems to make sense. The problem with the gold standard, and this is an epiphany I had probably maybe 30 years ago, and I began to ponder on it. I believe that I was given an epiphany with respect to that subject, and that's this. The gold standard whole concept is, in fact, a very simple thing. It cannot work. And the reason I say that, and the reason it actually has fallen by the wayside, is simply this. As long as you have a finite amount of gold, if a country went and they mined every ounce of gold that they could find in their entire territory, whatever that number is, it's a finite number. In other words, whatever gold is there, that's all that exists. And as long as you have an expanding population, and you always do, then what you're going to have is there's going to come a day, some point in the future of that nation, when there is not enough gold for every man, woman, and child to have a piece. And so now your economy breaks down. You have people starving. You have people kind of like in the French story, Les Miserables, where they're literally having to, steal or die. It's very simple. It doesn't work. And the only resolution to the problem for a government at that point is to go to war. So the gold standard always has and always will promote war, because that country now has to go to war and take somebody else's gold. That's it in a nutshell. And that's why we've had so many wars over millennia of one country going and taking the gold and the precious metals from another country in order to maintain their economy. It's pretty simple. It is not rocket science. There's your precious metals is a finite number, and if your economy is based on that number and you have an expanding population, you're going to have to at some point go take somebody else's, and then their population is the have-nots instead of yours. If you read your history books, you're going to see this has been true time after time after time. So one of the things that you're seeing in this country now is that at some point, I've heard people that understand this. So let me back up, and I'm going to say this. Anybody that is touting the gold standard either doesn't understand this or doesn't care. Now, I say this a lot. I don't want to try to judge and evaluate which one it is. I say this about just about every topic that I'm talking about, is there are people that either do not understand the topic at all, or if they do understand it, they're lying. They're misrepresenting it for their own purposes, whatever they are. Where have they come from? Are they being influenced to do it? Are they being paid to do it? I don't know. Don't even think that that's entirely pertinent to the topic at this point. What's pertinent to the topic at this point is that you understand this. Whoever's listening to this video, checking it out, and it resonates with, it's important that you understand this. It's probably one, the other, or both. Certain people that don't understand the subject, or if they do understand the subject, they are trying to deceive people for a reason, whatever that reason is. Under the Federal Reserve System, they control the interest rates by elevating the interest rates. And I believe that may have been the reason that it impacts unemployment, because it becomes more expensive to do business, because you're reversing a trend of a lot of cash out there to one that has less cash out there. That is the Federal Reserve System calling the money back. They're making the money return to them, to the banking system, to the banksters, and they're taking it out of the economy and taking it out of the hands of the people that felt like they earned it. They acquired that money through whatever means they did, and they're calling it back. And that's what the interest rates do. So the Federal Reserve System is a flawed system in the sense of this. I'm sure that this is going to raise a ruckus among a lot of people. I'm just going to tell it as I see it. If it resonates with you, great. If it doesn't, if you want to tell me I don't know what I'm talking about, okay, whatever, I just hope I don't disappear by putting this information out there, because the people that can retaliate. But whatever, I guess I'm old enough now that I've lived a long life that I got to do what I got to do and put the information out there. And that's this. The way the Federal Reserve System works, according to my understanding, is the people that are sanctioned by what they call the federal government. Oh, by the way, looking at the Constitution, I've tried to read quite a bit of it. I'm going to do more. I'm actually planning on trying to get as much of this basic information out there, uneditorialized, so that people will have it available and know it. But the Federal Reserve is an organization that was sanctioned to basically control our currency. Why we needed that, I don't know. It's almost like it's as if Congress at some point somehow decided to hire a contractor. They outsourced it because the United States Constitution provides for a treasury, and that's their job. And the treasury, as I understand it, is controlled by the Congress. They didn't want to be bothered, and so they outsourced the process to this new thing that was called the Federal Reserve. And what they do is they print money, they create money. I mean, these days it's not even printed as much. It's all a bit in a computer. But they create money and then they loan it to us. And there are middlemen that can do business directly with the Federal Reserve that make money middlemaning it. And they distribute the money to the public at large through these sifting hands. They don't do it for free. They do it for interest. They charge interest. They loan money directly from the Federal Reserve. They charge interest. And then they turn around and loan money in various different ways to, eventually it gets to the general public. And every time it changes hands, there's a fee placed on that money. And that's how the interest rates funnel the money back to the Federal Reserve. The thing about this is this. If the money is obtained by an interest agreement, from the moment it leaves the Federal Reserve, this is how I'm going to oversimplify it so that people can understand. Okay, they say, here's $1. And you can look through a lot of the conspiracy stuff. It's not untrue. If you look at your dollar bill, it's a check. A lot of you don't even remember checks, but it's a check. And it has the signature of the head of the Federal Reserve, and it's a promissory note. And it's definitely a wolf guarding the henhouse thing where they say this is $1, and we decide what $1 means. And it's completely subjective, and it's up to our interpretation. But we're going to loan you $1, and you're going to pay us back $1.01. Now, that's not the exact number. This is just to simplify the math and the concept for people to understand. We're going to give you $1, and you're going to return $1.01. You can go do with that money what you want to, but when the note comes due, you're going to have to pay up. So they take that $1. And they go and they do something with it. Later, the Federal Reserve says, okay, it's time to pay us back. And they say, okay, obviously the probability they would have that $1 again is virtually nil because they're doing things with it. But there's also another catch. So now you're going to pay back $1.01. Well, dude, you only loaned me $1. And they said, that's okay. We'll loan you another $1. And of that another $1, you can give us back $0.01 and the $1 that we loaned you before, which they probably don't even have anymore, because they've distributed it for whatever their purpose to make money, and inherently by the trickle-down factor that every time somebody touched that $1, they sifted it, and they skimmed off their commissions. It's done in interest rates, but and various different means, but everybody's taking a little piece as they go, and So the size of that dollar is diminishing as it goes out every time it changes hands through the banking systems and the financial systems. But to simplify the math, we're gonna say it's $1. It hasn't been sifted. They got the whole dollar. But even though they now have the whole dollar, they're going to have to return that dollar to the Federal Reserve System, and they're going to have to pay the interest on it. And they're like, okay, so now we have $1. We're giving it back to you, but we don't have the penny. And they say, that's okay. We'll give you another $1. And then you can give us back the penny and the $1. So the next person, the first time that happens, now they only have 99 cents, but they owe $1.01. So now time passes, it's time for them to pay that back, and they say, oh, well, we only have, even if they could hang on to the whole dollar, and it hasn't, which means effectively it hasn't done any work, they've got to pay back $1.01, but they only have 99 cents. Now they're out 2 pennies. And the Federal Reserve says, that's okay. We'll give you another $1 so that you can pay the interest back. And so now you can see that each time this happens, not just the value of the dollar, but the actual dollar itself is not a whole dollar anymore. And it's in mathematics you would call a degenerative curve. Okay? Where each time this transaction takes place, they're getting less and having to pay back more. They keep increasing the amount of money they owe back. And therein lies the national debt. That's what the national debt is. That's where it comes from. So any politician that you ever see that gets up and says, we're going to pay down the national debt, we have a plan, they either don't know what they're talking about once again, or they're lying, because it is not actually possible to pay back the national debt. Now they pretend like they do, and what they do is they turn around and sell that debt to pay interest on, which just compounds the degenerative curve of the equation. It becomes the value that they have, and what they're really doing is they're buying time. And the system is inherently flawed. And that's why you hear people say that you're mortgaging your children, because you're buying time, but your children, it's going to wind up on the backs of them to pay this debt that can't be paid. Now, they have done some extraordinary tap dancing on how they can manage the system and extend it for an unknown period of time. One of the ways they did that is through OPEC. The video is not over. Sorry to interrupt. So if the TeeRant's giving you enough to think about, ponder on, or even cuss about, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you're going to ring that bell, make sure your notifications are turned on your account, or you won't even hear them. Thanks. And we're back. Okay, we're back. OPEC. OPEC is a league of oil-producing nations, mostly Arab. Could be more than that now, I don't know. But I do know that it's based on treaties that were made between them and the United States, where essentially we became their guardian angels, their henchmen, mercenaries, however you want to look at it. And in exchange for those treaties, they were peaceful and they lived without having to worry about a lot of stuff worldwide. In exchange for that, they would trade oil, and it was sold in US dollars. What that did was that it moved the United States from the gold standard to the oil standard. So our currency was backed by oil, because in order for most any country in the world to buy oil from a place that produces most of the oil in the world, they had to buy US dollars first. And that propped up our currency. Well, over time, those treaties have worn a little thin because the OPEC nations have been tempted to sell oil to other countries in their currencies, particularly China and even Russia. Of course, Russia is a major oil producer as well, and they also have sold oil to other countries in rubles, I believe they are, which has kind of watered down that platform that stabilized the U.S. currency. Also, because of the way that currency is purchased by the United States from the banksters and is attached to interest rate that is unpayable, other foreign countries have purchased debt from the United States. The thing is now is that it's my understanding, so they say, that we have never defaulted on paying dividends. But basically what it amounts to is that all these countries that have purchased debt from the United States in order to continue to be able to function with our currency, they basically get an allowance from the United States. So the U.S. taxpayers go to work, the government takes a portion of their tax. We believe it's to maintain the infrastructure of the United States, and it is, but in addition to that, money goes from our economy to other economies. And that's the big kicker, is when you have the money in your economy, the money that you have printed or whatever you want to call it, these days it's just bits in a computer, a lot of it, or most of it probably, you have an outflow from your economy rather than an inflow. And about the only way to compensate for that, the only way to even begin to pay your national debt, which is still a kind of a catch-22, you would have to have currency from someone else coming in such a significant amount into your country. Then it would have to be exchanged for dollars, and then they would have to try and repay it. And I don't even know if that's possible if you think about it. So the long and short of it is, it's a declining system. It will fail. It's just a matter of time. And it has to do with how long that they can prop it up by those techniques that they've developed through OPEC and trade and so on. The debt is just going to keep going up and up and up and up, and it cannot be paid. So the dilemma that we're in today is this. It would appear, if you watch current events, watch your things that are going on very carefully, it looks like because China is such a mass producer, does so much importing to the United States, which makes that funnel go the wrong way for us, or should I say pipeline, go the wrong way for us, and because they have purchased so much of our debt and receive such a significant allowance, as the system begins to fail, it seems to me these days that basically we're in the process of picking a fight with China. And China is, I think, kind of willing. Unfortunately, it looks like war is coming. And I believe it is. I've been looking at jobs a lot lately, and many of the jobs that I'm seeing are for, as the band Black Sabbath would call them, the war pigs. It seems like the United States is certainly cranking up the war engine, and a lot of the jobs are requiring security clearances and stuff like that. So this is all happening. It's all going on. That's why there's all the talk about digital currencies and stuff, and the United States going to it. You can imagine how many advantages they would have to that, just being able to monitor the movement of every penny, as if there would be one, the movement of all money throughout the entire world. Every purchase that's made would be tracked by computer, and they'll know exactly what's going on. And which, if it shouldn't matter in a way. I mean, if you're on the up and up, and you are a regular citizen going to work, paying your taxes, feeding your family, what's to be said about that? The problem is that when they start telling you what you can do, you can have this, you can't have that, you're only allowed so many of these, and so on. So it's definitely a control play. But the big thing is this: by changing the currency and thinking it's an advantage to go to war, basically they can flip the bird to everybody they owe money to and just tell them deal with it and be willing to go to war and underwrite that process using digital currency that they've newly created. It'll be a reset, but it'll all start over again. And of course, people are going to die because, let's face it, war is war and people die. And it'll probably be mass quantities. For lack of a better term, it'll be one hell of a war. And, one of the things that we've been spoiled to in the U.S. is we have never had to fight a war on our territory, short of the Civil War, which was all our fault anyway, or at least since the Civil War, maybe I should say it, put it that way. Or we fought the war for independence and a number of things, wiped out most of the Native Americans, things like that. I mean, there have been things that have gone on, but as far as an all-out war, such as was in Europe and the rest of the world during World War II, we've been pretty spoiled in that way. Just be aware, this is something that's happening. It is something that was prophesied in the Bible. Things are going to happen. So just be aware of it. Don't be a fool. And you need to understand. I think that there are some things that can be done. The video is not over. Sorry to interrupt. So if the TeeRant's giving you enough to think about, ponder on, or even cuss about, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you're going to ring that bell, make sure your notifications are turned on your account or you won't even hear them. Thanks. And we're back. In the United States, 10% of the people hold 90% of the wealth. Basically, those wealthy people, if they would find compassion and love, I've studied wealth a lot. You always hear these people that talk about the new rich and how to go about and, working your finances to where you can become wealthy and managing your money right and stuff. And it's true. I get it. And they talk about being benevolent and so on, and it's key. Basically, there are a niche group of people that have hoarded the wealth in the United States to the point that if they would actually truly evaluate themselves, the government is treated like the all-parent and responsible for Social Security and welfare and so on. But if the wealthy people would begin to figure out ways to put that money back into the economy and stimulate it, it would be good for everybody. It's not my place to tell them how to do that, but I am here to suggest that it'd be a good idea. I mean, let's face it, the CEO of Amazon, if he took most of his wealth, if he took 90% of it, lived on 10% of it, he would still be well above the standard of living of most people in the United States. He could put 90% of his income, his wealth, back into the economy, similar to the stimulus programs that were done during COVID. And what do you think is going to happen to that money? Let's face it, he'd get most of it back. People would go on Amazon and spend it, and the money would come right back to him. And then that $5 bill, like I gave in my example earlier, would still exist, it would still circulate, and it would still show value for people. And he could do this continually, like a fountain where they have the water pump that takes from the reservoir, shoots it out, is caught in the reservoir, and recycled. And these are concepts that people should seriously evaluate if they want to live in a peaceful, prosperous society. You just can't have people hoarding everything, the wealth, until it runs out and expect it to continue, and it won't be good for them either. Because let's face it, if war comes, some of them will probably die too. There's always conspiracy theories and all this kind of stuff about how they have shelters and stuff like that, and they've got it all figured out. Well, you know what? That might just suck too. It's not like the freedoms that they have now. They would have to live in a certain amount of fear. Once the whole grab, and I'm talking about war, once the whole grab, because that's what war is. It's a wealth grab. And once that grab takes place, you don't know. You don't know what's going to happen to you. You don't know if you're going to be the one that gets caught, that winds up prisoner or dead. So it's just not a good idea. Now, I'm not big about offering problems without offering solutions, and these are complex problems. But I can think of at least one simple solution aside from that one, that if they would begin to funnel that money back into the economy, to the people's hands. Henry Ford understood that. He paid his people well. He says, I'm going to make it so that people that work for me can afford to buy a car. That was genius, and it worked for him. And it worked for a lot of people that wound up driving his cars and improving their lives. The other one is that I know Texas and France, they don't have an income tax. They have a sales tax. Under a sales tax, there are a lot of cool things that would happen. In France, you don't even see the sales tax. In Texas, you do. You see it when you pay. You always have to add to what the price of whatever you're buying by the amount of the sales tax. In France, it's transparent. It's very WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. That's the way the sales tax is handled in France. Now, one of the things that I heard a guy talk about, he seems like a real sharp guy. His website is Minority Mindset, and I don't think he's talking about minorities per se. It may be a pun, and I'm not in his head, so I don't know what his creative inspiration for that name was, but I think he was just saying that the minority of people that really understand how to manage their money. I saw him in an interview, and he was saying under the Biden administration that all these people are going to be hired to work for the IRS. His platform is that he was going to make sure the rich pay taxes. Originally, there was nothing in the Constitution that allowed for income taxes of people below a certain income level. What he's saying is that, in this interview, he said, well, they're talking about hiring 80,000, forgive me if my numbers are wrong, 80,000 people in the IRS. He said, now let's understand that, first of all, this isn't going to happen all at once, and that in the course of the time that program rolls out, like 40,000 are going to retire. So they're really only hiring 40,000 new people instead of 80,000. And they're backfilling people that will retire. The thing he was saying is that the theory is that the new 40,000 workers are going to go to work to try to make sure that the rich are paying their taxes appropriately. He was basically saying, I can't back up what he's saying, and I don't know if he can, but I think it stands to reason that the rich tend to pay their taxes. They do know a lot of loopholes, and they know how to. It's my understanding that Amazon has not paid a whole lot of taxes, but that's because they've grown so fast, because they could expense a lot of the money that came in. Then, of course, the CEO gets a nice fat paycheck. And, as far as his personal taxes, I can't even begin to speak to that. But that was the theory, is that all these corporations were going to begin to pay taxes. What he was saying is, look, first of all, these people, the haves, the wealthy people, first of all, they don't want to be bogged down in dealings with the IRS. So they pay the taxes, and they have lawyers to help them do it. And so if the IRS challenges them, they're going to have to go to battle with all these lawyers. It's going to be lawyer against lawyer to figure out if it's all right. At the point that if they start to find out, oh, well, I guess they've got their stuff together, then all these people are going to have to start justifying their jobs. And it's just a matter of time before they come after regular folk that are, workaday people and trying to do their best to pay their taxes, don't have the hours in the day, and don't have a lawyer to help them do it so much. That's when they're going to start preying on the general public. Well, this is the thing. Under a sales tax, first of all, it would be the corporations that are responsible for making sure that the tax money is funneled through them to the IRS. And they have the lawyers. A regular person that doesn't own a huge corporation and things like that, they would not have to worry about it because they just go to the store, pay the price that's presented to them, and the taxes are paid. The revenue goes into the system to maintain the infrastructure of the country, and it's done. And if it comes down to a question, it'll be the people that have the lawyers that will be responsible for making sure that the taxes get paid. Now, that might be a little bit untrue in the sense that if you have small businesses that are not huge and they're just trying to get started and going through, yeah, they're going to have to bear the brunt of that, but they're going to have to do their own taxes right now anyway. It's just going to be a function of learning it. Now, in this system, in most any system like that, unless they figured out how to do away with taxes altogether, it's the old joke. In a divorce, it's always easy to divide up the money because the lawyers get it. Well, there'd be kind of a system like that where, the lawyers are certainly going to have a job that pays. But at the same token, there are advantages to a sales tax. And so think about this. Basically, what it amounts to is it's going to tax you on your disposable income. And when I say disposable income, in Texas, certain, food goods and things like that are not taxable. Other things like toothpaste and household goods, they are. The basic concept is that if you have money to spend and you go and spend it, you pay taxes because whatever you buy is going to be taxed through sales tax at the register. And the beauty of this is now it helps you also with the concept of money going out of your economy. Because if a tourist comes to the U.S. and goes to the store and buys something, they're paying taxes. They're paying U.S. taxes just because they had money to bring into the country and spend. If a drug dealer goes to buy a Porsche, he pays sales tax. So it really doesn't matter how you got your money, whether your money's clean or it's dirty. If you go spend it, you pay taxes. To me, it seems like a simpler system, and it could be more efficient. It would remove a lot of stress from regular folks' lives. At the end of the day, it seems to make more sense to me. And that's just me. Who am I? I'm just the TeeRant. Just putting it out there to make you think. You could prove me wrong, prove me right. At least you thought about it. TeeRant out.